the local option sales tax to be used for, quote, sewer systems, unquote. So remember, that's an enabling law. So the council is not obligated to, so it's a box, if you will, a perimeter. The council, when it decides to use local option tax pursuant to that authority after the voters give it, they can use a part of it, they can use 80% of it. So over time, they've shifted where it goes within it, whether it goes to the full extent. That's not shifting away from the sewer system. I just want to make that very clear. It's a different use underneath, always bounded by what the voters delineated as the outer boundaries. So it's not as if for the last 20 or 30, 25 years, we've decided to go willy-nilly all over the place, whatever the voters said be damned. It's nothing like that. I do want that to be very clear.
I guess my concern was this. So if we're talking 2 to 4 million, obviously we were saying we're shifting $40 million from our roads and our sewers to go to the levy. I didn't know that's just completely different than saying we're shifting maybe 2, maybe 4 million is what the bond issue would have to be made to.
No, actually, because of the interest, they run the numbers.
Mark, you'll see later on agenda item 6F, which is a resolution approving and adopting the Potawatomi County-wide multi-jurisdictional, oh, that's not right. It's D, I'm sorry. Resolution authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute an agreement with the Iowa Flood Mitigation Board to use sales tax revenues from the Iowa Flood Mitigation Program. What that is the state, on our 7% tax, 5% goes to the state, 1% goes to the city, 1% goes to the school district. Any incremental increase over the next 20 years of the base of sales tax we have today, we capture 70% of that. We went to Des Moines about a week ago and got approved for up to 57 million. In order to get that 57 million, we have to increase our sales tax over last year's base rate sales tax. We have to wait for those increases to happen, and what our intent is to use the first year or two of our local 1-cent sales tax to start that process of construction, and then we anticipate we'll get $1.8 million, and towards the end we get almost $5 million a year through that growth in sales tax revenue. So you can imagine each year we're anticipating it will go up a little more. 57 million of the 114 million gets paid for, and the 114 million includes some of the flood fighting costs of 2011, federal money we use for that. So really what it is about 40 million locally that goes to the levees and the complete rebuild of the Indian Creek floodway, which was built in 1938 and is in need of rebuilding. So early on you heard it was a $50 million cost, and why is it 114? Some of it's the federal match, but in addition to doing the levees, since we had the opportunity to get this flood mitigation money, we also included in the Indian Creek concrete conduit that runs through the middle of our city that protects a big portion of our city that we really had no way of paying for, and we saw this opportunity to do both of them. So that's why we're in the 90 million range now. First 10 years would do the levees. The last 10 years would rebuild Indian Creek. 57 million from increases in the sales tax, not out of local pockets other than the 5 cent. Some will come from Omaha, so I guess it is out of local because it is our increase, but it was money that you'd spend anyhow that was going to the state, now gets to stay here. No increase to the local taxpayer because they would have spent it anyhow. The 1-cent sales tax, by front-end loading with that, our calculations say save about 20 million in interest. So we're saving the taxpayers 20 million by doing this. We think that since the water rains, it runs down the street, it goes into the sewer and goes into Indian Creek. That's certainly, to me, part of the storm sewer system, which is how the language of the ballot read, streets and water systems. We think it's an appropriate use. We're waiting for the city attorney to verify that. So.
One other thing I just want to add is that when this ballot issue was passed, at that time, our sewers were combined. So you had your stormwater going into your sanitary system. So, yeah, and now they're separate, but I mean, that money was used to separate them, so they're still both they're both sewer systems. It's just one is for storm and one is for sanitary.
At the time, they anticipated 3 million. 3 million should be spent, well, we collect over 8 million now, so.
Yeah, I guess I was 9 years old apparently when this was passed, so I didn't actually have the option to vote on
Me
it.
too.
But I guess my main concern is still comes back to this. We're voting somewhere around $2 to $6 million, just ballpark figures, away from our roads. Driving through town, there's always something else. Even on page 1, we can recognize, $25,000 to this payment, $32,000 to this payment, this sewer, this sewer, this sewer. There's plenty of work that always is going to be done, and if we take it away, how are we going to replenish it? And it will need to be replenished and break something
The
down.
vast majority of road repairs are paid for by road use tax. We pay for a portion with the 1 cent sales tax and a portion with bonding, but, we'll just have to schedule programming in and around it, but, again, it's 2 million one year and 2 million the next year, and frankly, that's one road project of a decent size, a few blocks, but.
I guess I'm still a little bit concerned about the answer to Mark's question, because you raised agenda item 6D about the application.
He asked about the funding, so I was trying to explain.
Right, how much of this that we were really talking about, and the write-up for 6D says it is proposed that the remaining $25.8 million in the local match be paid for with revenues from the local option sales tax.
That's over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
So when he gives that number, it's per year, per budgetary year.
Okay, so the total cumulative effect is much larger.
Well, and if the legal opinion comes back that it is not, we cannot use this, then we have to move on to option B, and that would be to, do a bond issue and have $20 million in interest. So, there's not, it's gonna be one pocket or another pocket, any way it goes. We just prefer to be able to, since it is sewer, to use it in that way, because it's gonna save the taxpayers so much money, and we've got a lot more people contributing to it. But if the legal opinion comes back and says we can't do that, then it has to be repaired regardless. So that'll mean more than likely an increase in the levy to cover the bond issue and the interest from that, as much as we would not want to have that happen.
Well, and that'll affect all sorts of vital city services. And with regard to the roads, I agree our roads are not in the best of shape, and that's not due to any lack of effort by public works employees. They were out there in the rain. I don't think anyone's faulting them. I want to be very clear. The road use fund, where your money goes to Des Moines and then gets doled back out to the state, is not very kind to cities such as ours. I mean, there have been European settlement in this area since 1713. This is one of the oldest. The two rivers basically are where people tended to settle. They didn't settle in the middle because you weren't near water, and that was awfully important in those days. Well, it still is, but now you can turn on the pipe, and then they didn't have them. But the point is those the system, as far as I can tell, looking at it, is set up primarily Des Moines-centric. If you look at the ring of suburbs around Des Moines, particularly West Des Moines, which is very similar in size to us, they have about 8 blocks, the Valley Junction section of West Des Moines, that is as old as Council Bluffs is 3/4 of our streets. And the road use funding is made to replace roads at a rate of West Des Moines, not ours. So if you have a concern, as I think all of us up here do, that we're not getting our fair share of money, considering our areas have been paying taxes to the state for far longer than West Des Moines, before it even existed, by about 100 years, that's something that we have to talk, where our hands are tied on that one. I agree, but unfortunately, you'd be barking up the wrong tree if you talk to us, because we don't have any control over that. I'd just be straight with you about that.
Yeah.
Well, and we're, I mean, You went way beyond your 5 minutes, and I don't know if you got your question answered, and I noticed that there's someone behind you waiting to speak, so I want to make sure that your question is answered before we move on.
I mean, my comment was
And we'll be
mainly-
here in 2 weeks for the same, sorry, I meant to interrupt, but we'll be here in 2 weeks for the same issue, because this is an ordinance and it goes through three readings.
My comments were just more specifically to the local option sales tax itself. Is it needed, is it not needed, you know, because if we can just divert $2 to $4 million from this local option sales tax to something else, are we being overcharged as taxpayers right now because it's not needed if we can use it for something else? That's really the point I was trying to make.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Darlene Kofo, 2627 Avenue J. My questions has sort of changed, but if your legal department determines this is part of the sewer system, why is the resolution needed at all?
Because, if I may, because as I said, if the voters, if they delineated, here's how much, imagine it as a box. The voters said you can spend it on sewer systems.
Buddy, Jeff, can I get to sit in the front row? And then
So,
we'll get you.
so that doesn't mean the council is obligated to go out and spend 100%. Maybe that's not that much is needed. The voters have authorized to a certain level, but we can spend varying under it. It's a ceiling. So over time, we've changed what we spend different things on within that box. And so when things change or they shift around within it, they're within the authority of the voters. And that's why we're getting the legal opinion here, to make certain that this current suggestion meets those rules. I'm quite confident it will, but it doesn't hurt to have that confirmed by a review of the Iowa case, the common law.
Okay, and if it does fall within those parameters,
Yes.
why is this resolution needed at all?
Oh, because in the past, because, as I say, the bogs, we've never included the levees, particularly Indian Creek. I believe most of us up here, not everyone, to be fair, believe that it fits within that box of voter authority. But to change it around within it, we just can't do it willy-nilly. We have to operate by resolution, by law, so that you can see us do it. We can't do it in the back room. So,
If that's the case, though, then I think the verbiage should be changed to be very specific, because I'm concerned about carte blanche, so to speak, without coming back to the voters.
well,
I think what the intent was, and I don't know if we're going to do
I
this either
understand.
next week. No, the ballot specifically says what it can be spent on, and as Councilmember Ringenberg pointed out this afternoon, that Part 2 of that law doesn't really include language that it has to be in conjunction with the language of the ballot, and so I thought we were going to see an amendment to include that, but we may see it next week, we may see it later.
and if I may, the other thing is if it, bear in mind, if it isn't included within storm systems, we have about 3 choices. We can go back to the voters, and if you don't approve it, we can bond and double or treble your taxes, which we'd be obligated to do because we can't default as a city. It's unconstitutional under our state constitution, and that doesn't require going to the voters. You would force us to raise your property taxes, probably doubling most people's based on my estimates of it. I'm not a finance person, but it's a significant increase at the very least. And it wouldn't be shared by the folks from Underwood and Neola, all those folks coming here and having the benefit in Omaha. Particularly a lot of folks come to the Manawa Power Center from Sarpy County and some parts of Douglas. Because they come into parts that would be underwater, if they don't help share in it, the property tax owner here, if we have no other option, we have to vote, we have to pay for it somehow, or 40,000 people are underwater. And if faced with that choice, I'll have to double your taxes if that's what we have to do. And we're trying, if the law allows us, and I think most of us believe it does, a way that would allow us to pay it over time, to avoid $20 million in interest, and to share that cost with all those other folks who would otherwise be, with respect, freeloading on our system, well, that's a much better choice, and I hope to God it's allowed.
I'm not against your choice.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that the verbiage stays very limited as to what you can do with that money without going back